April 15th. But, given the way the playoff scenario is, if for some reason, we come back and play, they've got a few ideas for using those next, 6 weeks or so. Because of the way the playoff structure is down here, it stretches out over about a month. I think they can condense it if they really want to get back onto the field. But, at this point, we're just waiting. And, I've been doing Zoom practices with my boys online, and
Nice.
have to share what they've been doing. We'll do some film work and things like that. Watch some D1 games from previous years or even earlier this year, and just kind of watch it together. So, which was good. I mean, I think the boys just miss being around each other after being off for a couple of weeks and locked with their parents.
Where are most of the kids on your team from? Like what towns and cities? Are they all Florida guys?
Yeah, they're all from the Tampa area. So it's a day school. So all the kids are from either South Tampa, West Tampa, Pinellas County, like into St. Pete a little bit. But most of the kids are pretty much from the Tampa area. So you've got most of the kids in the Tampa area either go to Berkeley Prep, Plant, which is the local public school for the South Tampa area, and then Tampa Jesuit, which is a Catholic school, all boys school here in the area.
What's like the aspirations for the kids on your team and like the top players in the area? Like, do they want to go off and play college lacrosse, maybe somewhere like in the Northwest, maybe in like the Northeast or a little bit in the Midwest or whatever, or they kind of want to stay local and play maybe for one of the bigger state schools?
For sure, I think there's a trend. There's always been kids that wanted to play next level lacrosse, but like a lot of places, even from my time in Colorado, they're so familiar with the big schools and the Florida States and Floridas that you don't really have to pay much to go to. That going out of state to some of these other options was not really the number one choice for a lot of these top kids. So years ago, when I was coaching at University of Tampa and I was coaching the Tampa Bay Fire, we had kids that played at WNL, a couple other places like that. Definitely D3 type areas. Ithaca kid, Stevenson kid. A couple of kids that stayed here and went to Tampa, but you weren't really seeing that next level of kid. Now I think you're starting to see in this Tampa area specifically, you're going to see 4 or 5 kids out of each class amongst these few different high schools knocking at the door at Division One. The 2022 class is really strong between some of the clubs in the area and our team specifically. So we've really seen a lot of uptick in talent across the board. The 2020 class for me at Berkeley is strong. We have our first Division One commit. Colby Kudlow is going to Vermont, so he's got to prepare for the anti-Florida by going up to Burlington. But and then I've got one of my other guys is Jimmy Stifler is going to Swarthmore. Kid's off the charts academically, so he found a great fit in a school like that. And to be honest, there's a bunch of other kids in that class who are really strong for me. They're just not going to play at the next level. So,
Sure.
If we can start to get 2 and 3 and 4 guys in each class that will look at playing at the next level, which in the class behind them, I think we might have 3 or 4 guys who play, D1, D2, D3 lacrosse. But a lot of my kids are very high academic at Berkeley. So, as it kind of limits the choices of schools that have lacrosse programs. So it's just kind of getting them ready to see if they can take advantage of those opportunities.
Mike, also being not just kind of like the director and, a coach in the Tampa area, like the Florida director for 3D, but also a coach in the Tampa area, but being like the national director for camps at 3D lacrosse, what are you noticing across the board or across the nation in the 22 class versus maybe the 21 class versus the 20 class?
Well, I think last year was a really good, our Rising event was a really good cross section of what the talent level was going to be. We had seen the 2020 class the year before, and they were extremely deep, extremely talented, and the coaches had eyes on them for years, it felt like, because of not being able to communicate with them once the rules kicked in. So they had a really good look at those guys. The 21 class is positional, right? I think certain positions are stronger than others. We saw a ton of massive defensemen at Rising last summer that made it very difficult for the offensive guys. I mean, there's still a ton of great talent in that class, but, a lot of the D1 coaches that were at that event were walking over with me to go check out the 22s and just get a quick look at them. And you could tell they had a really good you could tell that was going to be a more talented class. The defense was strong. The offensive players were really playing at a high level. And there wasn't many coaches watching them outside of just saying, "Huh, what do we got going on over here?" I mean, we were told that if we can bring back most of the kids that came in the 22 class from 2019 to this summer in 2020, that it'd be a really really great event because of the quality of talent they saw last year.
Sure. All right. Well, it's 2 o'clock now, so we're gonna roll the intro, start the show. We're gonna talk. We're gonna talk a lot about just kind of the impacts and effects of this virus. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going on, but it's definitely going to be there's going to be a ripple effect, and there's a lot that goes into I think kids' recruiting process and their personal experiences as a result of this. So we'll talk that on the show, and we'll talk a lot about how kids can get exposure, what's the best route to take, and how kids can kind of react and respond to what's going on right now. So if you don't mind, our producer Cliff rolling the intro and a quick word from our innovation partner in Epic Lacrosse.
This is the beginning of meditation.
All right, welcome everyone to our next episode of Beyond the Game. We got a special guest in Mike Ryder, who is the director for 3D Lacrosse down in Florida, also the national director for camps at 3D. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Nice and hot down here in Florida, but again, just like everybody else, just keeping it to our property down here.
No doubt. It's good. It's good to have you on, man. I think it's very interesting, especially this time, because for a couple reasons, right? When you talk recruiting, I think you have to kind of look at what's going on at the college level, because it's a trickle down effect a little bit of how it can impact the boys that I'm sure you're helping through the process, as well as me, as well as your events that you run. But it's also interesting just because from a high school perspective, you being a high school coach, the timeline, the season, it's different in Florida versus maybe New York where I'm at. So you want to quickly talk about just how you're trying to just help your community of kids through this, whether it be a 21 who plays for 3D and wants to know, hey, how is this going to impact my recruiting process? Or maybe a 22 who's just getting into it. How is it going to impact them down the run? And then what are some of the unknowns and uncertainties around this? Because obviously you can't answer everything as it relates to how kids are being impacted.
For sure. I mean, the example you gave of dealing with the 2021s that are with me, some already have a lot going on when it comes to the recruiting side of things, but for a few others, they're really just getting started. And I told them to use this time for a few different reasons. Is, hey, what can you do that's not field related to get yourself ready? A lot of kids haven't really done the homework that they need to on the colleges that they're interested in. And, having honest conversations about where they are right now compared to what those schools offer and are looking for. So, putting these lists together that include academic criteria of the school, whether it's top programs that they have, things that they can start to think about a little bit more specifically, so that when they come out of this, they're a little bit more prepared than, maybe a lot get so preoccupied with the spring season that they don't really have time to prepare for the summer. So preparing now is just one extra thing you can do. And with the 2022s, it's get better, right? I think all this does is buy you time to work on those things that you might not be as strong at on the field, right? Strength, power, watching film. I mean, I think not a lot enough of guys watch Division I games, right? You go back. I mean, that's been the great thing about watching everything on Twitter and Instagram now is there's tons of old games, new games, pro games that kids can watch and start to pick up on those things. So, be a student at this time, because, where I grew up, not too far away from you, I grew up going to Hofstra games all the time. And that's, going and watching them in 2002 and the team that they had, that really got me to fall in love with the game. And not everybody has that ability to go down the street. And now nobody has that ability to either go down the street or watch it live. So take advantage of what's out there and really prepare yourself for some of these things.
Yeah,
Anything you can do.
yeah, no doubt. I think that's a great point. Just to turn to digital, how can you use digital to improve your intellect, your skill? Also, turn to digital and look at yourself. Right, watch old film of yourself, purchase old film, create a highlight video that you've been dragging your feet on. As college coaches are now turning to recruiting because they can only do so much with their teams, and the high school coaches are the same. Like I was talking to Lars Tiffany of Virginia a couple days ago. They literally can't watch film and get better. Like that's not something that they're allowed to do at this moment. So like literally all they're doing is, some Skype, some Zooms, some text chains. And then, maybe coaches now are at a point where they're starting to turn to recruiting. And, I talked to probably 15 of our athletes so far over the last 10 days who we helped through the process. Some 22s, some 21s, boys, girls. I was shocked to hear that some of the athletes, when I asked hey, what have you been up to? Who have you talked to in the last couple months? It was like, well, I talked to, this one school that I visited and didn't, stay over. And I was like, okay, well, who else? And I'm like, that's it. It's like, well, you're still only a 21. Like you gotta expand your list a little bit here. Like it can't just be a conversation with one school at this point, especially now that all you have are basically conversations online. I think building that list like you talked about is essential. And then the next step is like, okay, outreach, like put yourself out there a little bit and make that list even bigger. Because if you just stick to one or two schools at this point as a 21, the opportunities you're going to have in the recruiting process are going to be few and far between. It's just not enough correspondence, in my opinion. Do you kind of feel that same way with maybe some of your athletes and in your perspective?
Schools that I'm interested at, and they put it on one piece of paper. Well, it's a great start, but can you list out the size of the school? Is it an urban location? Is it in an area where you're comfortable with driving to from home, right? That's important to a lot of people, let alone, certain families and how much tuition is, or, what's the average ACT score if a kid gets every kid that gets in there, and starting to put those on a piece of paper, because you'll start to see, oh man, you know what, this school is not really the right fit for me from an academic perspective, or hey, this school is not really what I'm looking for in a size perspective. And then, you push forward a little bit more and you can start talking about the specifics of lacrosse. Is a coach been there for a while? Has the program been improving every other year? Can you start to turn your list into having 15 different columns that might also highlight things that are important to you in the search process that you may have not thought about before. And I think that's one of the benefits of the late recruiting process in general, is you get to figure out what you want a little bit more. So I think if you take the time with the list now, attaching the contact list of all the coaches at that program or all the programs on the side, you can start reaching out, especially if you make a little highlight tape of either the early spring or last fall or the end of last summer, and try and make a teaser out there to say, hey coach, take a look at me. I'm not sure what the summer schedule is going to be looking like, but here's me, here's my academic profile, and here's what I'm looking for. And and have conversations with guys like you or me, Corey. I mean, there's a lot of kids, especially down here in Florida, and when I was out in Colorado for so many years, that don't know about a lot of these schools that, are so familiar to us being in lacrosse for so long, that, they might not have them on their initial list. And you might see a school that you're familiar with and say, hey, if you like that school, check out this school that you may have never heard of before. I mean, I've gotten a lot of kids who have opened up the door to new opportunities because of just a recommendation from myself, because I know one of the coaches there or have sent players there in the past. And, I think it's a good time to do that.
Yeah, no doubt. So listen, right off the bat, for the people that are listening, like, you want to talk about getting exposure in 2020, get your video out there, right? Email coaches now, right? Reach out right now while this is going on. Like that's part of the recruiting process and getting exposure, is like what you do digital and what you do online. Now, let's turn to the summer and talk summer for a second, because who knows what's going to happen with the rest of the high school season. And, listen, if we can get back into it, awesome. And maybe that'll give an opportunity for more college coaches to come watch players live in their games. But in the summertime, that's big for team events, prospect days, and showcases. Now let's talk a little bit about pros and cons of each and how this summer, maybe one of those events can help some of your players. For you, Mike, like you guys run your Rising series. Talk about, that as an event, why you set it up the way you set it up, and how it helps players in the recruiting process in more ways than one.
For sure. I think, our Rising series breaks down to what I would call three key summer events for us. Two on the boys side and one on the girls side. The D3 showcase is something that we've been running for quite some time, and it's very specific to kids who are looking for Division III opportunities. Right now, it's in the June 23rd to 25th timeframe, unless that gets moved around. But talk about the best bang for your buck. I mean, there's 160-ish kids there, sometimes a little bit less than that, and usually about 60 Division III coaches. So the amount of kids that are getting looked at, and we only have one field going on at the time. So the fact that you've got all these coaches converged on one field and watching some good lacrosse, and these guys are training, staying overnight in the Salisbury school dorms, and really getting to know each other as teammates. So you get to see a lot better lacrosse being played, and all these kids are specifically looking for Division III experience. So you can really target in on the type of kids that are looking for that. So that's kind of step number one is, for those 2021s that are looking for those types of opportunities, that's a no-brainer. You shift into July, and we have our STX Rising D1 showcase. Definitely a lot more kids. It goes across, 4 different age groups. But as we've learned, that primary recruiting year, which would be the 22s coming in this year, 21s for last year, we had probably about 400 kids that were there last year, and 60 plus college coaches that weren't just Division I, but a lot of them were Division I. And the great part about this event is every year we teach a new offense that's specific to a college, that's running high level offense at the time. When we first started this, we were running the Duke Pairs offense. The year after, we were running a Cornell 1-3-2 type of look with some wing play. Last year we introduced the Team Canada offense that they ran at the World Games. This year we're still in kind of, obviously taking advantage of this time to figure out what we want to run going into next summer. And the great part about it is not only do we have the coaches there, the coaches are going to be an active part of teaching these guys this offense and seeing if they can react from an IQ standpoint and say, hey, what, this kid's really good at dodging down the alley, but can he learn how to pick and mirror and move it through X and play within a system with other kids?
Mike, I want to reinforce that for a second, because I think that's so unique to a showcase experience in general. Typically, the only time you get that experience is at a prospect day, where you get to get coached up by a staff or maybe a specific coach at an event. And talking to a lot of college coaches, and in terms of how you can help your son or daughter get recruited by a school. Well, when you have an opportunity for a college coach to coach your son or daughter, that's huge. And a lot of college coaches would rather that than sit on a lawn chair these days, because you're really getting to know players more than just seeing their talents, their speed, their IQ. You get to get all the intangibles. So at a prospect day, when you go to a specific college and you play for that staff and you get the day in the life experience, that's kind of unique. You're getting that, which is great. But if you can go to a showcase where you got 60 to 100 coaches sometimes watching you, and also getting coached up by not just one staff but multiple staffs, it kind of creates like a more comprehensive recruiting experience where you got to get the best of both worlds, what you get at a prospect day, and then also kind of like what you get at a showcase, which are pro, the pro of the prospect day coming in to the pro of the showcase, which I love. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to reinforce that, because that's really unique. A lot of showcases you just go and play, and then it's like, all right, there's the selfish ball hog who runs up and down the field and no one's saying anything, and now there you are stuck not touching the ball for 20 minutes.
Agreed. I mean, we think about all that, and not only just saying, hey, we're running an offense, because in any offense, someone can be a ball hog or not playing, good lacrosse, but to have key terms that initiate from behind, out of 2-man games, out of up top, out of wing dodges, all these different things that we want to see. Not only we want to see offensive players learn how to in a 3 hour period learn an offense. We want to see defenders and how they defend from these different areas too. So when you talk about the hands-on portion of the coaches being in there, I mean, now more than ever, coaches got, barely half a season in this year. They're going to be itching to get back on the field. And it's great because we have a training process of kind of, hey, this is what we're trying to do this summer. And, we're going to jump on phone calls with these college coaches as well as other coaches from prep schools and high schools around the country who get involved and teach them, hey, this is a simple version of what we want to do right here. Here are the key terms. And then they go and execute it on the field. And you get to see a lot of different dynamic play out of these players, which you might not really see when it's a roll balls out and play type of situation. And, I've heard it being said before, what's the importance of a showcase? Because some people just don't like playing in showcases. I think it's important as a lacrosse player to learn how to play with 5 other guys on a field, right?
Yep,
and if you can jump on a field and learn how to play with other talented players, then, that says something about you, not only as a player, but as a leader, and his ability to mesh with other lacrosse players. I think that's a huge, it's an undervalued part of the recruiting process that I think showcases provide.
We got some comments coming in right here, Ryder. I think I got to bring up that Tahoka says he misses you. And then he's coming at you a little bit. He said, "Hey, Coach Schatz, you remember when we cleaned up Berkeley?"
I wasn't with Berkeley then.
Yeah, so Hoka, if you're listening, if Ryder had anything to do with Berkeley at that point, it probably wouldn't have been the case. So just remember that.
No, at that point, I was just trying to get to Hoka dialed in, learning how to play on the field, which he turned out to be all right at.
Talk about coaching and working with him a little bit.
Well, he came in and was really hungry to get better. I mean, I think there was a lot of obstacles in his way from learning to mesh with a new group of guys, doing well in the classroom, getting used to being in a weight room. And I think IMG allowed that process to happen fast. And, there's a lot around him to help him without his positive attitude of just wanting to get better in the classroom and continue to learn. I mean, the conversations that him and I would have in the middle of games were awesome. Things that he saw that I didn't see. You can tell he just was a student of the game, even drawing up plays for the rest of the team. So he knew that part of his game was strong. So for him to really focus on getting where he needed to be to step on campus at Albany and play right away, without having the distraction of issues in the classroom. I mean, it was a real testament to kind of the work ethic that he had coming into that unique situation at IMG.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. I mean, like experiencing and getting to play or coach, guys like that. I always find it fascinating when you say, I learned from him too, and seeing what he saw on the field. It made you better as a coach, right? Because it made you see the game from a different perspective, and maybe you didn't pick up on the same things, which is really cool. To get to coach such a talented player like that is awesome. Now, obviously, he's a special talent. A lot of guys and girls who are out there that are getting recruited, they have to do all these other little things to get exposure, and those are things I really want to focus on this show more than anything, especially with what's going on with this virus that's going on, because it is definitely going to impact, I think, recruiting locally and nationally. And as an example of that, at least from where we're at in New York, locally, when you don't have a high school season potentially, that it really hurts, because there's a lot of kids, especially in the 21 class, who it was kind of their year to really make a stamp and be a huge part of their program, develop a nice highlight video, maybe make it and take their team to a playoff, and put themselves in a position to play in front of coaches in a clutch situation in a big time game. That kind of could potentially get ripped away from them, which does affect it. It makes the summer recruiting circuit even more interesting, and then who knows where that's going to go. Could make the fall even more interesting. From your perspective, how is this virus impacting, the kids that not just play for you, but maybe the kids in the area locally, and their personal recruiting processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is going to show which kids have discipline, because I think in a time like this, it's very easy to sit in our houses and not do anything. And I think if you can be that type of kid that's using this time for value, whether it's hitting the wall, whether it's hitting the weights, whether it's, reading books. I mean, all that type of stuff is development of you as a player, and I think the kids that put in more time and effort into this process now, despite not being able to be with their high school teammates every day and get that aspect of competition, I think that's something that you need to continue to build on, and so that when you hit the summer or whenever we get back on the field again, you're not 7 steps behind. I think a lot of guys are going to be 1 or 2 steps behind just from the lack of being able to go out and compete against another team. I think you can't replicate that anyway, not even in the backyard. But you can get your skill sets up in the backyard, and you can get your strength up in the backyard, and if you can be disciplined enough, it's going to free you up in the summertime to play lacrosse at a higher level and maybe jump ahead because other guys are working. I mean, we see it in all the videos that are getting sent, and guys doing a little bit more than the guy next to him or their teammate. I mean, that's the stuff that's going to go a really long way. And don't take a day off on that stuff. There's no reason to. We got plenty of time in all these days. Even if you're doing online classes, there's time to build in before, after, during to do a lot of different things, lacrosse specific, body specific, mind specific, all those things, and really take a look at your own game. If you have the ability to look at film of yourself, either from this past fall or for some of us who have had 10 games of our high school season so far, be a critic of your own game. Say, hey, what am I not good at? Have I used my left hand enough? Is my footwork up to speed? Is my strength going to be there? The same thing you'd tell a kid coming into college as a freshman, right? What are the stuff you need to work on to get on the field right away? Now it's what can you work on now to be a more complete player when it matters most and college coaches are watching.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great advice. I also, one piece of advice I want to give to the athletes that are kind of in that boat is like now, guys still and girls, they've got online classes and stuff till like 2:30. And then typically when you practice, let's say you practice from 3 to 5 every day or 3 to 5:30. I think you should kind of create your own plan during that time frame that relates to development, like you're talking about, whether it be personal development, IQ, skill, and then also like recruiting. I think like take a piece to research maybe one school. Take a piece each day, 30 minutes to sending out some emails. Take a piece to watching yourself on film and building that video. And maybe just scrolling through Instagram and watching some things that can make you a better player. I think if you kind of create a plan every day during that time that kind of got ripped away from you during that moment, I think it's going to, in the long run, really help you during your own recruiting process because you're getting better mentally, you're building more connections online, you're getting better physically because you're outside and maybe you're going for a run and you're working in your backyard and you're working on your skills. But I think if you don't create that plan and have that regimen and that discipline, this time could really get wasted very quickly. And it's not going to be that effective once you can get back out on the field, whether it be late spring or come the summertime. So, one thing I want to emphasize on this show in particular, just because of Mike, your expertise and what you do with Rising in 3D, like player development is so big for you guys, which I respect. And I think player development helps in so many ways because you're striving towards becoming better at something you love, which is lacrosse. But it also helps you as a result of getting recruited and also hopefully playing for your college team if you're a 2020 out there. So I think that's it's a great message, and I think it's really important to kind of convey as we move through it. So we have about 7 minutes left. I'm still kind of curious, Mike. Like, being that you work within a region, you work in high school, you work club, and you're also a national director working with camps, and you see so many good kids from so many different grades, so many different states coming to your Rising events. What are some things that stand out to you? Just being able to see so many good kids from all over the country, anything. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective what you see there.
I mean, I think at an event like Rising that, where we almost filter out some of the kids that are the higher level kids on their given teams and clubs before they even get to our event, you're like, okay, I'm with a bunch of other top kids now. What's going to make me stand out? And, I think the first thing that pops off, and I talk with college coaches on the sideline of these things, is the kids that have speed, just off the chart speed. It's hard to replicate that, right? It's hard to ignore that in the recruiting process. Most of the kids out there can throw and catch and run, right? And play defense and play all these different positions and be flexible as an offensive player. I think What are some of those intangible things that are going to set you apart, right? Can you ride harder as an attackman than the other lefty attackman who also scores just as many goals as you do, right? What's going to set you apart? Can you be dynamic to set your offense up and be a leader out there, right? I think in this day and age, I think one of the things that is very underrated is just the ability to be a leader out on the field. A lot of kids are afraid of getting in each other's faces because they want to be liked, or it's their friend. At the end of the day, I mean, we've all had guys that we've played with and played for that demand a lot out of us as peers, and because of that, they get a lot more respect later on. And so if you can challenge yourself in a situation where you're on a team that you just met the day before, and you can be a leader on that team, that'll raise the level of your team. I've seen individuals move from one team to another in a showcase situation because we're saying, hey, you know what, we need to even the teams out here, and we'll move one person over, and that change of just that individual can have a huge impact. And that's not from him, scoring 5 to 10 goals. It's just
Sure.
pure effort on ground balls and riding and, just energy, right? I think coaches want to see guys with a motor. And if you can show that in a situation like this where you're with other high level players,
Yeah.
that's really what's going to set you apart in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's a good point. On a college road tour I went with my dad on in February. We saw 9 schools in 3 days. One coach we sat down and one staff we sat down with was talking about a kid had just committed to a school. He was a 2021, and we were like, what's the deal with this kid? Like, why'd you take him? He ended up going to a prospect day. The prospect day was one of those more difficult, grueling ones. It was like all day, probably 5 hours of gameplay, film session, tour. Like, you're there all day. You're staying the night before. And this kid just he wasn't the best lacrosse player. He was very, one of the better athletes there for sure, but he just he never got tired. He played as hard as he could the entire day. It was extremely coachable. He had great grades too, which was really helpful. And the coach was like, how do we pass up on this kid? Like, his upside just based on his attitude is so high, and his athleticism obviously is good. They were like, this kid's coming in our class. Like, there's no way we're not taking him. So to your point, like that's totally something coaches look for, and it's helpful. Now, one last point. Let's talk a little bit about like the trickle down effect with college. So the NCAA looking to rule here, the ruling is basically giving an extra year of eligibility due to the coronavirus, making a talented senior becoming a 5th year, playing another year. Like, how do you think this could impact not just college lacrosse, but also the recruiting process for maybe some kids at the high school level?
Yeah, I think every program is going to have a different situation, right? You're going to get some that have 5 or 6 guys that come back from their senior class. Others are going to graduate and go on to jobs, right? Some might have 2 or 3 guys. Some might have 0. So I think each program is going to have to weigh their options and say, okay, am I going to take less in this other class coming in? There's going to be a trickle down effect, right? Are guys going to come in redshirt? Are more guys going to go and try and do a prep year so that they're a year older? Because if you're coming into lacrosse, if you have just that sophomore and junior and senior class ahead of you, that's what everybody else dealt with, right? But now all of a sudden you have a freshman, a sophomore, a senior, and a super senior class that's all in there and competing over the same spots. So I think, coaches will be smart. I mean, it's all going to work out in the end, but
Yeah.
some of these schools are going to have to go about their process a little differently. Some are going to maybe halt where they are in the recruiting process. Others, I think, are going to push it later into the summertime and still get to try and get themselves a look at the 2021s, even into next fall for the 21 class, and definitely
Sure.
into next summer for the 22s. And then there's the movement piece, right? We've seen players enter this transfer portal, and so it's going to be a little bit like the Wild West in figuring this stuff out, but similar to the college coaches figuring out the process with the new rules a couple of years ago, right? They're going to have to figure out this situation in a similar manner, and
Yeah.
finding out where these kids end up is not going to be easy. But you want to make sure you keep simplifying the process for yourself. Continue to play good lacrosse. Don't do too much. Don't feel that because the recruiting timeline might be shortened that you have to overdo it and go to every single thing you get invited to, because that's just not
Yeah.
a positive use of your time.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's tremendous advice. And like you said, it's different for every conference at the college level. Like, and as an example, the Ivy League, they're deciding by tomorrow afternoon whether or not they're going to allow students to be eligible to basically get a master's degree, potentially PhD, and be able to play that fifth year. That's not something that's typically allowed in the Ivy League. So that could change some things. And again, that's just the Ivy League, right? That's one conference, that's one league, and every other league is gonna figure out how they're gonna approach this thing to hopefully help their student athletes. So who knows how it's gonna kind of shake out, but it's an ongoing conversation and it's changing daily. As we mentioned, the Ivy decision coming tomorrow, that changes things. Something coming from the America East towards the end of the week, that's something else that could affect it. So parents and players should stay up on this stuff. They should use, again, every day a little bit of time towards recruiting to see the news, see what's going on, see how things are changing, tune into webcasts and live shows like we're doing today. But, all in all, Mike, we really appreciate your insight and your time. Again, if people want to learn more about what you're doing with 3D, with their Rising events, and how they can maybe utilize them as a resource to get recruited and go to it, how would they go about doing that?
You can go to 3dlacrosse.com and go to our showcases section. You'll see a drop down for our STX Rising Showcase Series. Again, that includes the D3 Summer Showcase, includes the D1 Showcase, it includes our Rising Girls Showcase, which is one of our up-and-coming opportunities to get in front of college coaches. And, from there, reach out. There's contacts at the bottom of each of those pages with some details. Again, we're prepared to be flexible in a lot of these things, and we've been going after some of these top players and talking to top coaches to try and fill up these events over time. And we understand that there's a halt on what the summer could bring, but our D1 Rising Showcase, for example, is in July. We're hoping that everything's good to go, and that might, where that usually was the end of the summer, that might be the beginning of the summer for us now. So, be flexible, reach out. We have a ton of people within our 3D network and beyond that are open to having conversations about, what's the best process. And that's kind of our goal, is we want to have an option for every kid, whether it's the Division I kid who's going to play at Virginia, or it's a Division II kid, Division III kid. And anyone that wants to play at the next level has an opportunity to get in front of coaches. And, again, going to the STX Rising section of the 3D site will give you all the information you need to know.
Awesome. Mike Ryder from 3D Lacrosse, thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week, 2 o'clock on Tuesday.